Well, hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. Above my desk I have a small shelf, and on that shelf are some small books. One of those small books is a book that I turn to quite often. I don't think I really turn to it for inspiration in particular, but you know those moments when you just feel like you just want to sit back and just look at something and just kind of drift into it? Well, the book I'm going to talk about this week actually allows me to do that. It's by Patti Smith, the musician, the photographer, and it's called A Book of Days. It's a small book, as I say, a hardback book. It's very well priced. I recommend it. But I kind of have a strange kind of relationship with Patti Smith. Well, culturally anyway. I never really understood her music. I loved the cover of Horses. Who wouldn't? That Maplethorpe picture, iconic. But her music itself, I don't know, it just never really seemed to work for me for some reason. And in fact, I found myself in a concert in Mallorca, in a small theatre, a good few years ago, and she was performing. As I say, it was a small theatre. It was only a few hundred people there. And we were really close to the stage and the band were really good. But again, I still didn't really connect with her. About halfway through, she decided to recite some spoken word poetry that she was making up as she went along about a girl she'd met backstage. Again, it didn't really connect with me. However, her photography does. And I think it's interesting to reflect on a creative person who's working across multiple platforms, that they don't have to connect with you with everything that they do. I'm a huge fan of Bob Dylan, as is Patti Smith. His music, for me, connects. His writing connects. His paintings don't, and nor do his sculptures. His whiskey and bourbon, though, I can recommend. Anyway, back to this Patti Smith book. So, I'd previously read her autobiography, Just Kids, about her life with Robert Mapplethorpe. And I suppose, in a sense, we have to go back to Mapplethorpe with Patti Smith to kind of understand that photography is intrinsic to her kind of progress through the performing arts. She always has that Polaroid camera with her. She has this very set aesthetic that she hasn't really changed in the way that she dresses and also in the kind of work she makes. A Book of Days is exactly that. It's a year, a series of days and a photograph for each day. Some of the photographs she's taken herself, some of them are found images, which I suppose in a sense reflect on her feelings for that day or memories of a life lived. So in that sense, to me, this little book is photography. And Patti Smith is photography. That's maybe something to think about. Perhaps small is a theme for this week. Again, not deliberate, just seems to occur to me as I'm speaking. I'm about to tell you a small story, a little story, a short story. But I think that one that's pretty powerful in explaining how bad photographers can be at taking up on opportunities. So this is what happened. This week I received an email from somebody. It said, "Do you still want me to contribute to the podcast?" Well, I'd sent them the email on the 6th of March, 2023. I received their response on January the 6th, 2025. Now, God only knows why that was. Maybe they were cleaning out their inbox a little bit late. But as photographers, as creatives, as people, we have to take up the opportunities that are given to us in the moment. Unfortunately, no, I didn't want them to contribute anymore. Here's another small story that I think has a lot of power. I recently bought a car. In fact, I'm waiting for it to be delivered. And when I bought the car, The car was with a garage quite a distance away from where I live, a couple of hours' drive. Obviously, I'd seen it online, and therefore I'd made the decisions around the car through a photograph. That's something I'm often talking about, is how important photography is to people who are not photographers, who don't look at photography, and also to our everyday decisions that we're making, particularly when it comes to buying things. Anyway, I wanted to buy the car, and I contacted them, and they sent me 2 little videos, one of the car and one of another car that they thought I might also be interested in. I chose one of the cars, and I spoke to the manager of the garage, which is a large dealership for a particular brand of car. I spoke to the manager, and he said to me, "Well, it's very interesting. What do you do?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm involved in photography, and I teach photography, and I'm a photographer and that kind of stuff." And he said, "Oh, photography, how interesting that is. So technical." And I thought to myself, well, no, it isn't actually. And you've just sold your car on the basis of photographs, and you've just sent me 2 videos that you made. You're a photographer. Are you technical? Despite the fact that I've been involved with photography for quite some time now, I still come across photographers that I had no knowledge of. Photographers that I should have had knowledge of, I think, because these aren't photographers that perhaps have just appeared or just emerged or who have kind of gone under the radar for a long time. These are photographers who've got careers that have put them into the spotlight. So I should have known about them, but I don't. And this happened recently with a particular photographer who I'm not sure if you'll have heard of either, but if you have, just ignore what I'm about to say. If you haven't, then I really recommend that you take some time to look at his work. I think it's some of the best work I've ever seen, and I don't say that lightly. Now, I came across this photographer on Instagram, on a post, on a page, I should say, which seems to be run by somebody called Drew Thomas Levy. I don't know Drew Thomas Levy. Again, perhaps you do. The photographer whose work he was posting was John Vachon, that's Vachon. It instantly made me want to find out about him. So, Vachon was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and received a bachelor's degree in English literature from St. Thomas College at age 20, followed by further studies at the Catholic University of America. He received a bachelor's degree in 1934, and then moved to Washington, D.C., after receiving a fellowship to attend graduate school at the Catholic University of America, as I say, to study English literature and become a writer. As he began his studies, a few months later, he was forced to leave school due to his drinking. After his leave from graduate school, after he left graduate school, I should say, Vachon looked for work around Washington, D.C. and found his first job in photography, working for the Farm Security Administration's Historic Division as one of the photographers hired by Roy Stryker to document the plight of migrants during the Great Depression. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of the FSA work. You may know Vachon through that. I was aware of the work. I didn't know him. In about 1938, Vachon married Millicent Leeper, who was known as Penny, who sadly committed suicide in 1960. And the following year, Vachon married Marie Forestier. After being hired as an assistant messenger with the Farm Security Administration back in 1937, Vachon had quickly developed his own photographic skills. He became a member of the FSA's regular photographic staff and produced memorable documentary series in the Plain States. After moving to New York in 1947, he became a member of the Photo League. Again, I know of the Photo League. I didn't know of Vachon. Contributing numerous book reviews to the newsletter Photo Notes and participating in the 1948 exhibition This is the Photo League. After working for many years as a staff photographer at Look magazine, Vachon became a visiting professor at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design in 1974. But he sadly died the following year of cancer, aged 60. There's a potted, like very potted history of Vachon there that I've cobbled together. But I really recommend that you go out and find out more about this photographer, about John Vachon. And I think his work you're going to find incredibly inspiring. I know that his portrait photography that I've been looking at will definitely be informing my work in the near future. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that we're setting up our own YouTube channel, and I'll be creating a series of films which will be exclusive to YouTube. They're going to be called snapshots, and they are short reminiscences, I should say, if I could actually say it correctly, memories of photographic shoots that I've been on as a photographer and also worked on as an art director. If any of you remember, many, many years ago, I used to have a column in Professional Photographer magazine that I edited, where I used to talk about all of the different shoots I've been on, mainly with celebrities, or what I often refer to as people you may have heard of. Never ceases to amaze me how many people haven't heard of people who I sort of venerate, and vice versa. I haven't heard of people who they think highly of also. Anyway, so people you may have heard of. That column was called I Know Because I Was There. And the films for YouTube are going to be very similar, very honest reminiscences, as I say, from the perspective of somebody who was actually on the shoots or who commissioned the shoots. So from that perspective, as Harry Borden was talking about YouTube last week, very much a continuation of the truth that we try to tell on this podcast. Well, what I did find when I was writing that column was how often things went wrong. Pretty much every single time that I told a story, I suppose in a sense, in a very English way, it was very self-depreciating about the things that I had done wrong, invariably. Lack of planning, having to come up with kind of answers for problems as they occurred. And the films on YouTube will definitely be focused on that. But what I started to realize writing this column was that getting things wrong, it didn't matter. Failing wasn't a problem. Because although everything had gone wrong, it had gone right. Everything had been okay at the end of the day. And I think so often with photography, there is a fear which develops around pushing the shutter, actually making an image. That insecurity as to whether you're good enough, whether or not your work is good enough. And actually, I have never believed that any of that matters. I know that when this podcast started, it was very amateur, and I'd like to think it's not a lot more professional now. I'm sure that the films I make for YouTube won't be particularly good initially. I'm not a technical kind of a person, so the technique side of things, the setting up of kit and all the rest of it, is going to be a little bit hit or miss. But that's okay. It's not really the point. I think that's what came over last week in the conversation with Harry. That what's really important is just giving it a go, telling stories. And we all have stories to tell, don't we? So if you want to see more of me getting things wrong and hear about me getting things wrong, then do please go to our YouTube channel, as I say, at UN of Photo, and subscribe. I think at the moment I've got roughly 14 films, all kind of lined up and ready to make. And the idea is that I'll post one a week, as well as, obviously, this podcast, which is also appearing already on the channel. So who knows? Maybe I'll see you there. I'm a great believer in that idea of seeing no problems, only seeing solutions. That might be incredibly annoying to people around me. I'm sure it is. But it's held me in good stead, I think, creatively. So I really do encourage you to try and think that way in your photography, but also to try and do it with a sense of research and understanding and realistic expectation. Because if you can't bring those to your work, then you really are going to be disappointed with what you create. And I suppose in a sense that leads me on to the idea of education. I've spoken previously on the podcast about the online MA in professional photography that I lead. I'm just in the process, actually, of teaching that at the moment. I didn't teach in the first semester, but I'm teaching on that course now. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying that conversation, that debate with people with perhaps a little bit more experience of life. I think photography is a lot easier with that experience of life. I think it's much more difficult when you're younger. Without subject matter, we don't actually have photography. We need something to point our camera at. We need somewhere to make images. We need a reason to do it. And I think also we need a reason for our images to exist. In a way, our expectation should be informed by that reason. Anyway, I'm really enjoying the MA. And if you'd like to find out more about it, then just drop me an email through unitednationsofphotography.com. I'll email you back, and who knows, maybe we'll get a chance to have a conversation. I'm sure, like me, you're hearing an awful lot about AI at the moment. It seems to have become a dominant conversation, particularly within the media. I don't just mean in the media telling us about AI, but actually the media being affected by AI. I had a conversation, I think over a year ago now, with Nick Dunmore of the Association of Photographers all about AI, and you can find that in the archive for this podcast. I think it's well worth checking out. So often we have these conversations, and over time, opinions change and the conversation can date. I have to say, so far I'm still sticking by my opinion and my standpoint on it. However, it is very clear that AI is becoming a dominant factor, or a dominant tool, perhaps, for a lot of us. I've heard of plumbers using AI. I know a lot of people in marketing are using AI to write. I know that we also have seen a lot of images coming out of the terrible fires in Los Angeles, which have been created by AI and are therefore falsities, untruths. But of course, the photograph proves it, doesn't it? It proves the truth, but of course we know it doesn't. There's that dichotomy. And AI is really right at the heart, at the centre of that. So my recommendation of AI, or for AI and how to deal with AI, is to keep reading, keep listening, keep an eye on where it's going, keep an eye on AI. But don't worry too much about it and don't panic about it. Because however good it is, with photography, you still need a photographer, in essence, to create the original, not the copy, not the manipulated, not the collaged, but the original. And that is pretty much it for this week. I think in a way, I'd like to think we are an original podcast. A lot of you tell me that we are and that there isn't anybody else like us doing what we do. And I'd like to keep it that way. And of course, the one thing I'm always going to do is I'm going to suggest that you, and I'm going to try myself, to always take care.